Don't speak, lock your doors and be discreet. No talking on the phone, got you riding with a piece of mind to show the world the pages that I seen. And when it hit the web, watch it spread like a disease. Heard about it overseas, they call it the WikiLeaks. Break the shackles on my feet, kidnap or kill plot, assassinate and still pay the cost for the data lost, scrap and peel. If it's a hack, what's a rapping deal? They put the target on my back, I keep on singing my blues. But what I write about in songs, they never play on the news. I'm on the run once again for the things that I said, and I'm just trying to make sense of it all in my head.
This disclosure is about the truth. But the attack on the truth by war begins long before war starts and continues long after a war ends. We hope to correct some of that attack on the truth that occurred before the war, during the war, and which has continued on since the war officially concluded.
We estimate that when fully analysed, these logs will bring to the public knowledge more than 15,000 previously unreported civilian deaths, to add to the 107,000 which are already in the Iraq body count database. 15,000 is a huge number. It's equivalent to 5 9/11s or nearly 300 7/7s. The new deaths are concentrated in small incidents, killing 1 or 2 people at a time, scattered all over Iraq and occurring almost every day for the whole period.
Yeah, roger. I just estimated there's about 20 of them. There's one, yeah. Oh, yeah. Correction, Banner's 1-4, Route 3. I don't know if that's...
Neighborhood Smith Element, copy White 6.
That's a weapon. Yeah.
There must now be a judicial inquiry into the legality of all of these deaths. If unjustified or unlawful force has been used, prosecutions of all those responsible must follow.
6 is Crazy Horse 1-8. Have individuals with weapons.
4 radio. Radio Banner's 1-4.
Yep, he's got a weapon too. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 1-8. Have 5 to 6 individuals with AK-47s. Request permission to engage.
Roger that. We have no personnel east of our position, so you are free to engage over.
All right, we'll be engaging. Roger, go ahead. I can't get them now because they're behind that building.
Neighborhood Smith Element, copy
We got
White
an RPG.
All right, we got a guy with an RPG.
I'm going to fire. Okay.
No, hold on. Let's come around.
Behind buildings right now from our point of view.
Yeah, we're going to come around and get him from our ability to get all
individual with RPG. Getting ready to fire. We won't get...
Yeah, we got a guy shooting. Now he's behind the building.
God damn it.
Speed coming around.
Negative. He was right in front of the Brad, about there 1 o'clock. Haven't seen anything since then.
Just fucking, once you get on, just open them up. Okay, Roger. I see your element. You got about 4 Humvees out along this. You're clear.
All right, firing.
Line here. When the stage line
Let me know when you get it.
Or shoot. Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire.
Hey, Roger. Keep shoot. Keep shoot.
Bushmaster 2-6. We need to move time now.
All right, we just engaged all 8 individuals.
Yeah, we got 2. We're still firing.
Roger.
Got him.
6 is a 2-6. We'll move, but we got 13.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
bypass.
God damn it, Kyle.
all right. I hit him by heck. All right, you're clear.
All right, I'm just trying to find targets again.
Bushmaster 6. This is Bushmaster 2-6.
Got a bunch of bodies laying there.
All right, we got about 8 individuals.
Yeah, we got one guy crawling around down there, but we definitely got some. We're shooting some more.
Better. Hey, you shoot, I'll talk. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 1-8.
From gangster rap to Julian Assange, the criminalization of art and journalism. Let's start with art. Specifically, the criminalization of the art form known as the Black CNN. by some so-called gangster rap, a kind of street-level journalism. Take the classic Dispatch from the streets of Compton in South Central LA by Ice Cube and NWA at the height of the crack craze.
I call them like I see them. If somebody come to me, like a sister, I say, sister, this and that. Somebody come to me, like a lady, I say, man, this or this. But if you come to me the wrong way, then you're going to be called one of them other nouns. I'm not even going to justify what we do because we just products of the system. We don't have no power. We have no power. We are just like a vacuum. We just suck in everything. You know, we learn from our parents and we learn from the world. And the world is very sexist. You go inside the Raiders locker room and hear what they talking about. You go inside the Raiders front office and hear what they talking about. And you go inside the front office of IBM and hear how the men in there talk about women.
When we first started doing this in 86 or 87, all the record companies were scared of the music. We had to put it out on our own. That's why, to me, I didn't have any record company influence me. This was just what I wanted to do. We did it this way because that's what we felt in our heart on what needs to come out, what needs to be said. And that's what you have. You have people always putting a sugar coat on everything, and the kids are at an age where they want to know.
No, they don't want the 187.
That's the mentality. Living in LA, be ready.
I don't deny my kids none of the truth because the truth is true. You know what I'm saying? When they walk out the doors of my house, I can't walk with them and censor them from things that they're going to see in the street. The world is an ugly place, and, to hide and try to sweep that under the rug, all you get is a dirty rug.
I think that people need to understand that the idea of gangster rap, the power in it, is just an uprising of a people that have been, dependent all their lives. And they're just striving and reaching out for independence.
I'm the brother freestyling as well. I wear the Ben Davis shirt, I put some work, and if you step in a snip stop, you might get your fucking ass hurt, and better get your neck broke. I don't give a fuck, I'm no joke. Boom, boom, I smoke. LBPDLAPD, share ATF, arms, and tobacco fire. Boom, boom, they're about to see their motherfucking life expire. Daryl Gates and all the 4 niggas who beat King. Boom, boom to the memory.
And America breeds kids that are violent. I don't want to talk it out. I want to shoot. So we made in America. We don't come from another planet. So I think once America tones down her violence, once she stops becoming a bully and winning at it, the kids that live in America will stop that kind of behavior.
If you ain't from my hood, get a passport, cause East Coast grip is a mad sport. 54, SCO, and 7 years ago, East Coast niggas up and down Skid Row, standing in the rain, but little did they know, First Street's killing up the Pyru flow, kicking it in the door, caught them by surprise, didn't start shooting to see no whites of their eyes. Boom, boom. From the 6 Deuce coming with the gang. Boom, boom. The 6 9s coming from the back. East Coast niggas ready for the thrilling. Never reminiscing on the slobs that we're killing.
Does Arnold Schwarzenegger glorify violence? Do Storm and Norman, I think his name is Schwarzkopf or whatever. He's a hero. He wrote books on his violence, and he's a big star on all the violence that he was able to get other people to do. You know what I'm saying? Is he more violent? He's killed way more people than allegedly Snoop Doggy Dogg. So who's violent? And he's a hero. They want to, if he ran for president, I think he'd become president. because they look at him. He's the man. He's the killing machine. Man, when you sit back, man, and send your missiles into the capital, you send your missiles, sit back and just launch everything you got into Baghdad. How many people got killed there? And you gonna sit here and tell me all those bombings were military strategic targets? You must think we fools, basically. And he's more of a punk because he sits in his office or wherever he is and makes strategies and use the poor to go out there and lay their bodies on the line. You know what I'm saying? So.
Most of us make it back safe and in one piece.
You can't blame the child for being violent without going to the parents. You know what I'm saying? So don't come to us talking about how violent society is and are we promoting that. You go to the top. Colin Powell promoting it. Is Bush promoting it? Is Clinton promoting it? Hell yeah, they are.
Why do kids look at the rappers as leaders? It's because we tell them the truth. So now that we have their ear, should we stop telling them the truth, which got us to the position that we're in now? Should we start saying there is a Santa Claus, so when the kid grows up and there's no Santa Claus, he looks at you like you a fool, and he don't even want to hear what you got to say after that, after you pump that type of lie. I mean, these things destroy kids on trying to say the world is a perfect place and you're supposed to love everybody and think, yeah, but it's not really like that. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you how it really is. And when we tell them how it really is, everybody want to lash out at us.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. The young nigga got it bad because I'm brown and not the other color, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority. Cube was spitting street knowledge in these lyrics and accurately describing the fraught relationship between state actors, the police, and young black folk in South LA and South Central. The 80s and in the 90s and right down to the present day, as a matter of fact. Cube's profane lyrics spoke to a profound truth that is as true today as the day he uttered them. Because in terms of the relationship between the police and the black community, he anticipated the Black Lives Matter movement, which came 25 years later and was saying much the same thing. It seems that between then and now, and the fraught relationship between the police and the black community, ain't nothing changed but what years.
If it wasn't really for black people, white folks really would still be doing the calypso type of music. So we innovate all music, and once that realm of music is over, we throw it away and some other nationality grabs it and makes it big, like jazz. We had jazz and it wasn't a thing. Bebop was a thing, so we threw it away. So now we had bebop. That wasn't a thing. Rock and roll was a thing. Threw that away. Then you had soul music, R&B, disco. Now you got rap.
Living in Gardena, that's a hell of a spot because you're bound to get jacked, maybe beat or shot. Hanging out in Raleigh Park, about 20 deep. The young homies was.
It's a trip because America all over is in the same situation. Where emotional, open people. So our dissatisfaction is all out in the streets, and you can see it. But you go to the suburbs, and the neighborhood looks nice, but the dissatisfaction is inside the homes. That's because the parents of all of our generations definitely has lost touch on how to get us to where we need to be. And that's black and white. So the kids are just taking it upon themselves to do it. You know, it's a little distorted now, but you know, we definitely evolving into being something strong and positive, whether you know, we use dirty words or not.
LA Speaks Out is where you are, and please stay with us. 1-800-286-KJLH, Rap Rhythm, our special 2-hour feature.
Congress don't care that we are using profanity or saying the word nigga or whatever. The problem is we're distributing information without going through their little channels.
Today's hearing will focus on the impact of offensive, violent, and misogynistic language in the recording industry.
One of the biggest people that they try to attack right now in the rap music is Snoop Dogg. I mean, his brother is so concerned about, you know, the children, you know what I'm saying, the young black, the youth, that you wouldn't even believe, you wouldn't even think it's the same person. His job is to entertain the people. But personally, in our personal lives, everybody contributes, everybody has a charity, and, you know, they spend time in their neighborhood trying to, you know, clean up their brothers and sisters, or they, you know, the homies in they set or they gang, you know, get so many unsung heroes, you know, but you're never gonna hear about that.
Those who choose to advertise messages of murder and rape invite closer scrutiny of their actions. But I do know that I find that violence and rage in much of rap frightening.
But what's the state's response to these black griots like Cube in the day and their effort to speak truth to power, expose the corruption of state actors and the brutality of their own government? What was the response? By these racially biased state actors, arguably. They told Q that if he uttered those words on the stage, they would cuff and cage him. When he uttered those oppositional words critical of the government on stage, they cuffed and caged him. In the same spirit, street-level journalism, 20 years after Straight Outta Compton, came in the form of Cube's Guns and Drugs, whose hook really drew on the intrepid reporting of Gary Webb and addressed the CIA's and federal government's complicity in the crack plague that raged through Black America like a wildfire, fueling racialized mass incarceration and hobbling a generation. They give us guns and drugs, then wonder why in the fuck we thugs. They want to count the slugs, then come round here and fuck with us. This raises a critical question. Can critical oppositional rap that calls out corruption of state actors like cops, the CIA, the FBI, be viewed as a form of journalism, as a kind of black CNN? And can rappers themselves be viewed as kind of street-level journalists, protected by the First Amendment's press freedom guarantee? There are many who refuse to recognize rap as capable of being a form of journalism and refuse to view rappers as journalists. This is the same labeling game critics of Julian Assange play with him. Quote, Julian Assange is no journalist, the Assistant Attorney General proclaimed when the Justice Department unveiled an 18-count indictment against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in May of 2019, charging him under the 1917 Espionage Act for his role in the 2010 publication of a raft of secret documents exposing government lies and corruption vis-a-vis Iraq and Afghanistan wars and diplomatic communications regarding dozens of nations. By this logic, locking up Assange for publishing documents poses no threat to real journalists because he's not a real one. So press freedoms don't apply to him. Many liberals don't view an attack on Assange as an attack on the press because they don't view Assange as a journalist.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media.
The attempt to extradite and prosecute Julian Assange, and he's already been indicted, is a direct assault on the freedom of the press, on the First Amendment, and on journalism here in general. It's the very first prosecution of a journalist for doing journalism, criminalizing journalism, in effect, in this country, in blatant violation of the First Amendment. My case, many years ago, was the first prosecution of anyone as a whistleblower for leaking information, classified information, to the public. There have been many leaks before, but no prosecutions, precisely because of the First Amendment, which obviously forbade such prosecutions. So my prosecution was an experiment to see whether some law, in this case the Espionage Act, so-called Espionage Act, could be used against the non-espionage defendant. I wasn't claimed to be a spy. It was recognized that I was a source. In fact, they knew, acting out of patriotic motives, to give information to the public that the government did not want out. It revealed violations of treaties, revealed decades of lying to the American public, and of secret threats that had increasingly escalated a wrongful, hopeless, murderous war. Like, for example, the war that we have waged on Iraq for many years now. I don't think any of those wars would have come about had there been whistleblowers like Chelsea Manning or Ed Snowden, both of whom were facilitated by Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. If the public and the Congress had been told about the planning, the threats, the lies involved in those operations, I think that what amount to millions of people ultimately would have lived, would have had their lives spared. The point here is that for many years, whistleblowers have been essentially needed if we were to avert both unconstitutional and terrible, wrongful wars. Julian Assange set up WikiLeaks in order to facilitate whistleblowers, to facilitate, publish, really, information that governments were wrongly withholding from their public, and it was needed by the public, and he did so. I actually stood at his side in a press conference in 2010 when he revealed the so-called Iraq war logs. Thousands of pages, we know now, were supplied by Chelsea Manning about many illegalities, including torture. So a number of governments, Britain, which was a very cooperative partner in this coalition of the willing in aggression against Iraq, it revealed crimes, actually. Not only in the, it wasn't high enough level in the decision making to reveal how we got into Iraq, but what we were doing when we were there, which involved death squads, assassinations, and torture, widespread torture, was something that our government did not want known. It was a clear revelation of war crimes. And so it was kept classified.
By the same token, supposedly, rappers aren't real journalists, and likewise are not protected by press freedoms. But this supposed distinction between real journalists and non-journalists is both hollow and beside the point. Unlike doctors and lawyers, journalists are not licensed by the state, so that only and if they were licensed by the state, think about what that would mean. Only a small credentialized priesthood would be able to claim the mantle of journalists. And the state would have to approve them as journalists, right? So they'd have to get pre-approval by the very entity that we're supposed to be criticized, critical of, a watchdog on. It makes no sense. Unlike those professionals, when you're talking about doctors and lawyers, unlike those professionals, the state does not license who is and is not a journalist. For if it did, the state could simply refuse to recognize journalists that are saying uncomfortable things. Rather, a journalist can be and is anybody, regardless of education or credentials, who informs the public about newsworthy events. Darnella Frazier, right? The 17-year-old black girl who recorded George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, was given a special citation by the Pulitzer Prizes for her video that helped launch a global movement that protested racial justice. The Pulitzer Prize, remember, of course, is an award for, among other things, achievements in newspaper, magazine, and online journalism. The only requirement to be a journalist is to engage in an act of journalism, which is best defined as, I think most clearly, reporting to the public events of interest, public interest, especially when revelations inform the public about what the government is doing and what some of the government's most powerful actors are doing in secrecy, especially. As a 1977 Supreme Court opinion put it, quote, in short, the First Amendment does not belong to any definable category of persons or entities. It belongs to all who exercise its freedoms. So the act of publishing truthful information in the public interest is protected under the First Amendment, no matter who does it. To assert that publishing relevant information about powerful state actors is a right possessed only by those characterized by the government itself to be real journalists is itself a grave danger to the press. So let's briefly review the timeline for Assange now, so we get the background story here and we're all on the same page. WikiLeaks founded in 2006. 2010 is when they received the mother lode, if you will, of war logs and diplomatic cables, 250,000. And they got them from Chelsea Manning, then known as Bradley Manning, a low-level intelligence analyst in Iraq. Assange's supposed ideological theory, if you will, was this. This is the one that the CIA has actually quoted. Quote, "The powerful are hoarding information and keeping it from the people." And he wanted to set it free. And that's how he viewed WikiLeaks, right? He said, quote, "The goal is justice, the method is transparency." All right, as a law professor, I recognize the vital link between truth and justice that he's getting at there. Obama's White House then caused that release of all those classified State Department documents that at the time Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, took it very personally. They characterized it as reckless and dangerous. And Eric Holder said, "I'm going to open a serious criminal investigation with a grand jury, and they're going to try to treat WikiLeaks not as a journalistic organization, if there was any way they could find to, but rather as some kind of enemy intelligence organization." after a lot of digging and hand-wringing and fretting and trying, the Obama administration decided that prosecuting WikiLeaks would be a danger to the freedom of the press and probably run afoul of the First Amendment. So essentially, it treated him as a journalist. All right, that's what the Obama administration did, recognizing these dangers. 2 years later, 2 Swedish women approached authorities with sexual complaints about Assange. No charges, but Swedish investigators, of course, wanted to interview Assange. Assange agreed to go to Sweden if they would commit to not extraditing him to the U.S. if he went, because he recognized that the U.S. is looking for a reason. They refused to make that commitment, right? So he doesn't go to answer those charges. There never were charges, I'm sorry, those allegations. They hadn't reached the point of charging. Which brings us to 2016. All right, as Dems gathered in Philadelphia for their convention, there's a new email dump from WikiLeaks of the DNC's emails. And some of those emails expose unseemly things by the DNC. They show party officials scoffing at Bernie Sanders, suggesting the DNC, these emails suggested the DNC favored Hillary Clinton. And in one case, they questioned Bernie Sanders' commitment to his Jewish identity. Then in March 2017, WikiLeaks posts classified documents relating to the CIA's hacking operations. CIA Director Mike Pompeo, at the time, says, quote, WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service and calls it a non-state hostile intelligence organization.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service.
After 16 months of litigation, the UN formally ruled that I'm being unlawfully detained and should be immediately freed and compensated. The UK appealed, and we won the appeal in November. So there's now 2 rulings at the United Nations level saying that I'm being unlawfully detained in violation of international treaties, which the UK is a party to, and I should be immediately released and compensated.
We have to recognize that we can no longer allow Assange and his colleagues the latitude to use free speech values against us. To give them the space to crush us with misappropriated secrets is a perversion of what our great Constitution stands for. It ends now.
I will note Director Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, and then there is his statement that this, i.e. WikiLeaks and its publications, end now.
It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is. A non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia.
How does he propose to conduct this ending? He didn't say, but the CIA is only in the business of collecting information, kidnapping people, and assassinating people.
This is the same group that the Obama administration looked at and said, we can't mess with that without running afoul of the First Amendment, endangering freedom of the press, can't distinguish them from the New York Times, which also engaged in disseminating the same documents that WikiLeaks disseminated in 2010, many of the same documents. Now you have the government characterizing the same organization a few years later as a hostile intelligence service, non-state hostile intelligence organization. Non-state hostile intelligence organization. And that brings us to today. This is where we are. We're at a moment in which the Biden administration can refuse to appeal the decision made in Assange's favor not to have him extradited. The Biden administration is in a position to follow the lead of the Obama administration in recognizing that freedom of the press is vitally important, rather than following the Trump administration's lead and what Pompeo kind of characters wanted and continuing to prosecute someone like Assange, who's very hard to distinguish from the New York Times. And it will set a precedent that could be catastrophic for the press. A lot of what we're doing is part of the everyday business of investigative journalism. We're not talking about hacking. Much of what he's being charged with under the Espionage Act right now is not that he hacked or even was complicit in hacking, but rather that he received classified information, one, and then number two, that he distributed it. That's what the press does. The press constantly receives secrets of the government, often classified ones, and then publishes those secrets, and then keeps its sources anonymous. That's what the press does. So if you say that in doing what he did, Assange did, he was acting like a spy, he was violating the Espionage Act, you've opened all of investigative journalism to criminalization. You just now criminalized journalism and journalists and the relationship between journalists and their sources. Assange saw the potential of the internet for empowering the individual who felt powerless to do anything. All of a sudden, here's WikiLeaks. I, the individual, the powerless individual, can get in touch with WikiLeaks. And I have access to these documents. I have a little individual. And now I can help air crimes and right wrongs, right? And isn't that the journalistic imperative? Isn't that the very heart of journalism? And so that's the WikiLeaks and Julian Assange background and story. That's why we're fighting so passionately for Assange. We recognize that any precedent that is set in his case is going to have an impact on journalism, on art, on the kind of art we care about, here, rap, hip hop that we're going to talk about a lot more, that we care so much about. This could have a chilling effect. They're already prosecuting rappers in court on the basis of their lyrics. Already it's happening, right? And this is a precedent that could really, kind of facilitate that process and catalyze it even further.
Those revelations that were brought to us by Chelsea Manning and WikiLeaks, the results have brought about, it's a very big thing to turn around a country as large and as powerful and as rich as the United States. It's no easy matter, but it's happened. Afghanistan, they're leaving. The never-ending wars are ending. Iraq, they're out of there, as Marilyn just showed us. Guantanamo Bay, it's being closed. Every person now is trying to, in Washington, is trying to close it, to work out a way to close it without bringing more shame onto the United States. That only has come about, in my view, as a phenomenon of enculturation rising up through the people of the United States as the knowledge of the actions of Washington percolates up and then precipitates down to cause Washington to reconsider its actions in one way or another without losing a sense of authority in the world or amongst its people. That's the blessings that those revelations brought to us by Chelsea Manning, who, if I could say so, I hold as an icon, the same way as one would hold Joan d'Arc, a historical figure of phenomenal importance, bringing to us those revelations which have managed to close a chapter in only 10 years of Washington's aggressions. with the freeing of Julian, with the bringing home to his family of Julian, with the reinstatement of the qualities and the deliberations of the United States, of the United Nations, we're allowed once more to emerge and see the stars. Thank you.
All right, I feel extremely fortunate today to be joined in this discussion by somebody that I think is the definition of an authority on one of the subjects that is at the heart of what we're talking about today, gangster rap. From gangster rap to Julian Assange, the criminalization of art and justice. Layla Steinberg was Tupac Shakur's first manager. And also a mentor in a lot of ways, although she doesn't accept that characterization all the time. I really think she was to not only him, I've seen her mentoring many students through the years, and going into San Quentin and other places around the state, and bringing art into the prison cells, into the prison yards, and when the people are coming out of those places now, they're bringing the art with them. And so I'm really pleased to be joined by Layla Steinberg. We've been doing this for a lot of years. She co-teaches a course with me at USC Law School from time to time. So I really look forward to your taking over here and really giving us some authoritative utterances on all of this, Layla.
Thank you, Jody. So as an educator working professionally with artists, it's always been important to me that we don't look through the lens of entertainment, but that we look through the lens of art as activism and how we impact. And so over the last month, I've given the topic and the assignment to our collective about this case and about Assange. So we've come together with the artists in the group who actually really thought critically and put their thoughts into pieces that we're sharing. But I also want to invite anybody that might have questions, comments, feedback about what you hear today to deepen our dialogue. So our first artist that we have sharing is Ravina. And Ravina, I'd like to invite you to the mic and pass it to you.
Thank you, Leila. Red flags. Mama told me ain't nothing free here. And if they tell us it is, then they're gonna take something near, instill us with fear, spread false news to your ears. I can't stand all this ignorance. By now it's just clear that this country and the people that run it just fear those with a voice, those that they claim are lost souls with no home, stolen land grown to own. Now there's drones surveilling these hoods and these streets like it's their own. I'll compare the way mistreatment affects minds versus yours. You step into a reality that's masked with so much more, like fortune and wealth, like safety and health, built off the backs off my fam. And here we go stressing about glam, like Met Galas and censoring those with a voice. Free speech for those below, but those with authority stay quiet. Protests outside of museums, stay quiet. Protests outside on the streets, stay quiet. Fight for our lives with our knees, stay quiet. Speak up against what we see, stay quiet. Stay quiet, stay quiet, stay quiet, they say. Afraid of the masses, so they choose to just stare. Now we're forced to conform, like agendas and norms. Out of the box means out of our minds. When we speak up and fight, we're displaced by the night. And when morning arises, we fear losing our rights, a sight of the prize, a birthright to breathe. The fact that we're a target, like we're just too bold for them. The fact is that we know of them, those that are holding them in chokeholds and no indictments, and this fight isn't over yet. Morrison evolves and then lives by our breath and survives by our children. When we raise them, we train them to speak of these rules that are unspoken. And when morning arises, we fear losing our rights. a sight of the prize, a birthright to breathe. The fact that we're a target like we're just too bold for them. The fact is that we know of them, the ones that were holding them in chokeholds and no indictments, and this fight isn't over yet. Goes till the morning then, morphs and evolves and then lives by our breath and survives by our children. We envision a better future, ones with our kids at the forefront. Only thing that we need is to rip off this Band-Aid and bleed solidarity. Are you hearing me? Fight for our lives on our knees, stay quiet. Speak up against what we see, stay quiet. Stay quiet, stay quiet, stay quiet, they say. But we know we have every right to stay. May our nights be less weary, our daydreams less scary. Our children in safety and our elders in care. Don't just stare. Know that we believe in a future that is greater. This ain't about later. Because they may silence us with their laws, treat us like we're outlaws, but we know that we got God, and we know that we got us. So let all of these red flags burn into dust.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ravina. I'm inspired, and that is our intention, is to expand the message. So I just wanted to open it up before we continue to see if Jody had any feedback, or if anybody actually had a question or comment about Ravina's piece.
Thank you, Ravina. I'd like to know what inspired you to write that.
What actually inspired me to write that was thinking about the concept of free speech and how we have these people that are in authority that often act as the police of our own free speech. And I thought of the idea of the protests that were going on outside of the Met Gala. I thought of the protests that were going on just for police brutality. And then I thought about Julian Assange and how there's such a link between speaking out and this grant of the right to free speech, and then how quickly we get tear gassed, we get controlled, we get handcuffed for something that is ours, and that comes from a place of truth. As a woman of color, dealing with oppression, seeing it in cross-culturally in the communities that I grew up in, I was just trying to capture, or I was inspired by what I had seen by people out on the front lines who were speaking out against the issues we see. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, let's keep it moving. We might get one comment for each piece, which is great. Thank you, Ravina.
Unaccustomed as I am to weighing in, I'm going to hazard a thought, which is what I really liked about your piece and what in your remarks on it just now is that you are connected to the grassroots, right? We're out here. We've seen that the grassroots has changed things like nobody could imagine 4 or 5 years ago. There's been a real generational upheaval at the grassroots level. And that's what we're talking about, right? WikiLeaks is about making the little person, right, more capable of taking on the big juggernauts. It's really about, at the end of the day, can grassroots folk have an influence, make a difference? And so, I kind of felt that. I was listening to that part of your piece, for sure.
thank you. I appreciate that reflection.
And at the height of cancel culture, we have social media. We can cancel people in a minute. So I think as artists, it's really important to continue addressing that all of our voices matter. So thank you, Ravina.
Yes.
Hi, John. We're Dick Price and Sharon Kyle from LA Progressive. We produced LA Progressive Social Justice Magazine for 13 years. And we're so glad that you're willing to sit still for an interview.
My
By way of
pleasure to do it. Thanks for the invitation.
Great. So by way of introduction, for people who aren't totally familiar with your story, for 14 years, you served as a CIA analyst and case officer, which included leading the team that captured al-Qaeda's Abu Zubaydah in Pakistan in 2002. But then in 2007, 3 years after you resigned, you became the first CIA officer to publicly acknowledge that the CIA used torture, and its use was official policy under the George W. Bush administration. 5 years later, in 2012, the Obama administration filed espionage charges against you. You eventually pled guilty to violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act by confirming the name of an officer involved in the infamous CIA rendition program. Sentenced to 30 months in prison, you were released in 2015 after serving almost 2 years. And you've written several books about your various experiences, all with great titles: The Reluctant Spy, My Secret Life in the CIA's War on Terror, The Convenient Terrorist, Abu Zubaydah, and The Weird Wonderland of America's Secret Wars, and Doing Time Like a Spy, How the CIA Taught Me to Survive and Thrive in Prison. And then Sharon, a little bit later, wants to drill into your prison experiences. You also wrote a series of letters entitled Letters from Loretto, written from the prison in Pennsylvania. So as a first question, given that we're working on the Assange issues, what parallels can you draw from your treatment by the US government and its current treatment of Julian Assange?
I think that the US government, specifically the Justice Department, has learned lessons from a string of whistleblowers, and they're not good lessons. You know, one of the very first whistleblowers post Dan Ellsberg that the CIA and the Justice Department went after was Tom Drake from NSA, and they charged Tom with 9 felonies, including 7 counts of espionage. That case completely fell apart, and they had to drop every one of those felony charges. They began charging other whistleblowers. In fact, just during the Obama administration, there were 8 of us that were charged under the Espionage Act. And each one of those cases got a little stronger because the Justice Department learned from its previous mistakes, and it learned a lot from the Drake case. So when it got, for example, to Reality Winner, who was an NSA whistleblower and who was accused of leaking 1 page of paper, a classified analysis on Russian involvement with the Trump campaign. She got 5.25 years for leaking that 1 page of paper. Terry Albury, an FBI agent in Minneapolis, Minnesota, leaked a barely classified memo saying that there was systemic racism in the FBI's hiring and promotion process, and got 3.5 years in prison for that. Now, this law, the Espionage Act, was written in 1917 to combat German saboteurs during the First World War. It's never been meaningfully updated, and it was meant to go after spies, real spies, spies who steal secrets for foreign countries. It was never meant to be an iron fist against journalists and against whistleblowers, and that's where Julian comes in. This is the first time, at least in the last 75 years, that the US government has gone after a journalist, a decorated journalist in this case, using the Espionage Act. But not just the Espionage Act. They've enlisted the help of allies like the UK and Ecuador, and we learned recently Spain, to spy on him, to keep him in what was essentially solitary confinement in a situation that Niels Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, calls torture. And so what the Justice Department did to us whistleblowers, they've done in spades to Julian Assange, and they've coupled that with especially harsh treatment.
Well, I'm really excited to introduce our next guest, all the way from North Carolina to Los Angeles to join us in this conversation, utilizing his art. So, Bali Kid, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Justice for Assange. Julian Assange. Assange told no truths to expose those lies. He had enough access to be considered a spy. We tried to play it safe and go straight because death was on the right wing. We tried our best, but only could guess that going left's the right thing. When going left could be right, if y'all was good, then why hide? If you really stood for truth and justice, then why commit war crimes? The grassroots are past due, got us thinking cash rules. Want us happy buying lies and threaten our lives when we tell the truth. And we believe that speech is free. We think out loud and they can see the way we think, and if you think that being white can save your skin, I beg of you to think again. Just look at Julian, they really trying to do him in, conspiring to do him in. They hired men to do him in, like they think that he could do it again. Is this preventative, or is it punishment? And why are they witch hunting him? Even now, after he already done the thing, the governments are hypocrites. The citizens misrepresented. And when the poor children learn of this, you shadow ban the journalists and murder all of the truth seekers, threatening all the truth speakers. That's why in my community, we commit buffooneries, cheap jewelry, expensive clothes and high-end sneakers. But the type of peoples we become are getting tired of playing dumb. If you really want to make a statement, free Julian Assange, free Julian Assange. Cause the type of people we become are getting tired of playing dumb. Though we ain't rushing in the war, we stay prepared in case it come. And Lindsey Graham can give a damn if Freedom Bill protects the press. In retrospect, be retroactive. Or else it's just an empty gesture. Just an empty gesture. If Lindsey Graham could give a damn and the Freedom Bill protects the press, in retrospect be retroactive, or else it's just an empty gesture, just a waste of tax I pay, which practically helps no one. If you really want to be a help Julian Assange, Julian Assange, free Julian Assange, Julian Assange, Julian Assange. I know I said one more, but this is that one. Here it goes. Yeah. Assange told no truth to expose those lies. He had access to enough facts that he could be a spy. They tried to play it safe and go straight, cause death was on the right wing. We tried our best, but only could guess that going left was the right thing. When going left could be right, if y'all was good, then why hide? And if you really stood for truth and justice, why commit war crimes? Our grassroots are past due, got us thinking cash rules, and threaten our lives when we tell the truth. If we believe that speech is free, we think out loud and they can see the way we think. And if you think that being white can save your skin, I beg of you to think again. Just look at Julian, they really trying to do him in, conspire men to do him in, hire men to do him in, like they think, you know, that he could probably do it again. Is this preventative or is it punishment? And why are they witch hunting him even now after he already done the shit? The governments are hypocrites, citizens misrepresented. When the poor children learn of this, you shadow ban the journalists and threaten all the truth seekers by murdering most of the truth speakers. Why in my community we commit buffooneries, cheap jewelry, expensive clothes and high-end sneakers. High-end sneakers. But the type of people we become are getting tired of playing dumb. Though we ain't rushing into war, we stay prepared in case it come. And if Lindsey Graham can give a damn and the Freedom Bill protects the press, in retrospect be retroactive, or else it's just an empty gesture, just a waste of tax I pay, which practically helps no one. If you really want to make a statement, free Julian Assange, Julian Assange, justice for Assange.
Thank you, Bali Kid. Jody and I were just saying you have the anthem already.
Yeah.
That song will go viral. But I want to open it up because people may have specific comments on lines or lyrics in your piece. Oh, already, here we go.
Yeah, thanks for that really interesting piece. So I was wondering, that's a new piece, and as you were composing this piece, were you surprised at the connections between the persecution of this white Australian, this Julian Assange, and the traditional persecution and suppression of black culture and black people in America?
Sadly enough, I was not surprised. You know, I don't know. I wish we didn't have to have these kind of conversations, but I was not surprised. I believe that if a person or a group of people are in charge of controlling the rest of everyone else, it doesn't even matter what you look like on the outside. It matters like, are you in line with the agenda or not? So, no, I wasn't surprised, sadly.
Thanks so much for that response. You had a line, death is on the right. Can you talk to that?
Well, yeah, and some of the canons that have been forced down my throat, and some of the stuff made some sense where it was saying, like, try to be straight, you know, don't look away to the right or the left. And the way that in my lifetime, I've had to live like that. So I had to be straight. I couldn't sway to the right or the left. Death was actually all around. You know, I have another song where it says, death is behind me, chasing me faithfully. I pray it never find me. You know, so that's what I meant by that. And the reason that I used it in the context that I use it here, because I know the case. And it was basically the right wing of the White House that, you know, that's that CIA vibe. That's that wing, you know, where they, you know, they're very, very, very real and dangerous. So yes, death was on the right wing.
Yeah, I'm really digging these lines, man, about then threaten all the truth seekers by murdering most of the truth speakers, right? And that sent a chill through me because I remember it's come out that Pompeo really contemplated killing Assange, all right, as a response to this person who was viewed by the administration that preceded this one as enough of a journalist not to be prosecuted, not to be indicted, right? So from that to, you know, the CIA actually contemplating murdering a person who is engaging in First Amendment protected speech, that just sent a chill through me. Yeah, tell me about that line, man. Just talk to me about what you were thinking about with, you know, murder, because, you know, murder is so real. We're talking about Floyd and, you know, murder is real visceral to us. So, and you're talking about also murder or, you know, as you're saying, a truth seeker, truth speaker.
Yeah, there were many plots, and then they found out a way that they could. One guy even said, "We can't do it legally." They were trying to find a way to legally do it. And it was like, you know what? We'll just do it illegally, and you know what that implies. So, and based on the information that was leaked, they're not above that. So, with that in mind, I went into writing for this event, and I thought about all of our truth speakers in my community, and how rough the 60s was, and how that's
Fred
gone
Hampton.
on. Yeah. And it really, it kind of hurt me because when Tupac was murdered and Biggie was murdered, they were literally entertainers. You know, they weren't like standing trying to, they didn't take that responsibility on intentionally. It was thrust onto us. And you're supposed to tell the truth. If you do art tells the truth. It tells a story, the truth is in there. And it just occurred to me that we're threatened to not tell the truth by examples. And that's basically the choices as artists and as creatives that we have to try to navigate. Because we're gonna do it, we're gonna tell the truth. We just have to be poised about it, I would say, and figure out the best way to go about it without getting murdered prematurely or murdered at all.
I really like that point real quick because what you're talking about is spreading the truth. Assange is not being charged with spreading misinformation or lies. He's being charged with disseminating the truth, exposing corruption that hid behind a wall of secrecy. Right, so it is a truth issue. One of our good director friends, Robert Corsini points out that this really is about mass murder when we're talking about the Assange story. Did you have that sense? Were you thinking about that at all when you were putting this piece together? That we are talking in part about kind of exposing mass murder?
Indeed. There was, I really hate that I don't recall this author's name right now, but I think it was Iraq, something like one of those places over there in the Holy Land, where people were literally being killed, and it was recorded, and I have friends that were in the military, and it's weird stuff that goes on there. People, they enjoy killing, and they are sanctioned to do it, and they're fine, until the nightmares hit them or something like that. But I definitely thought about mass injustice. It takes a lot for me to say certain words. Like, I did not want to write the word murder down. I have to be responsible with, the pen. And I didn't want to write that, but that was just, I knew that was the way, I knew that that's all it really is. There was no way to dance around that. Speaking to y'all and trying to be responsible with my words and the energy that I put in the air, I would say mass injustices. That way, you can encompass all of the real ugly parts, But yeah, I did think about that.
Thank you, Polly Kid. That was awesome. We're going to keep it moving. So next, we're going to bring up Louis King, who has been an amazing artist and activist in our group. And we're going to see what he wrote on the topic of Julian Assange.
All right.
Yeah. Yes. I'm on the run for all the things that I've said. Nowhere to run and nowhere back now. Don't speak, lock your doors and be discreet. Some people keep their eyes closed, terrified of what they see. Others keep their eyes open, horrified in what they sleep. Paralyzed in the noise and paranoid in the streets. They can and will hurt you for everything that you know. And if you share it with the world, why would they even trust you for? Reading this now that it means that I'm long gone in Sudan, mauled off or even Hong Kong. They quiet down the words on the internet page. That same shit can happen from singing the wrong song. Information, pandemic, living a calm storm. Writing the right story, dropping the wrong bomb. Oh, God. I'm on the run for all the things that I've said. Nowhere to run but no turning back now. Sing it with me. I'm on the run and nowhere to turn. I'm on the run with nowhere to turn. I'm on the run with nowhere to turn now. Look, don't speak, lock your doors and be discreet. No talking on the phone, got you riding with a piece. Peace of mind to share the word, these pages that I've seen. When they hit the web, watch it spread like a disease. Heard about it overseas, they call it a WikiLeaks. Break the shackles in my feet, they call it kill plot. Kidnappers still paid the cost for the data lost, scrap and peel. If it's a hack, what's a rapping deal? They put a target on my back, I keep on singing my blues. But what I write about is songs they never write on the news. I'm on the run once again for the things that I've said, and I'm just trying to make sense of it all in my head. I guess I'm on the run for all the things that I've said. Nowhere to run but no turning back now. Nowhere to run but no turning. Nowhere to run and nowhere to. Nowhere to run but nowhere to turn now. Thank y'all.
like you were going to say something. I knew it.
Yeah, that was powerful. I mean, it really moved me emotionally. Those words, nowhere to run. And I'm a person who's maybe old enough to be your grandmother. And when I think about young people like you feeling like they have nowhere to run, it's kind of like what Jody opened with. We're dealing with the same stuff. It's just a different date. But the part of me that is touched with hope is knowing that you know this. So I don't really have a question. I just would like to thank you for doing what you do. And I'd like to encourage everybody that sees this to speak up so that the next generation doesn't feel like there's nowhere to run.
Thank you for that comment. That was so important. I appreciate your comment.
The word work with you, Lewis, is always just sublime. You know, you're just consistently on it. And I'm looking at this now, you know, and when it hit the web, watch it spread like a disease. Heard about it overseas, they're calling it the WikiLeaks. Break the shackles on my feet. Kidnap or kill plot. Assassinate and steal. I mean, you cram so much into so few words. All of that stuff, Pompeo, you know, the COVID analogy to misinformation being a disease, and misinformation is driving COVID, and you repeat it twice, you know, an infection early and you come back. I mean, it's just a blind word work, you know, as always with you, you know, because I'm a Shakespeare level.
All right, Louis. Thank you. Just gonna keep it moving and bring Jay-Hoon to the hot seat.
What's up, everybody? What's up, Asha? Alright. Yo. Look. Okay. Yeah. Look, I respect the right to free speech, but sometimes the situation's harder than it seems. If information you leak doesn't show the full picture, is the corruption a bonus or really just a fee? What's the intention? I see deceptions, I see the profit, the game of retention. I watch the news and see the objective. I see these fools become so defensive. Sometimes it seems that the choices are all evil. The country corrupted, but isn't it through the people? I see inevitably that power creates ego. If I had a pet, it might be this eagle. I can know and I'm able to know who is loyal and what is betrayal, to see what's reality and what is a fable. I see it all beyond all the labels. If the law conceals wrong, is it righteous to show it? Is it moral to let it be legal to cloak it? Is it okay to be honest and say I don't know all of the details, so my judgment is broken? I look at both sides, but the coin is still flipping. My shoes are not tied, maybe that's why I'm tripping. My tongue feels so loose that it keeps on just slipping. I see the noose as an escape from the prison, only to see that you're still trapped in the dungeon. My body keeps walking while my soul keeps running. I'd break a law for the ones that I love if I don't get caught. Thank God that I'm lucky, thank God for my freedom, thank God for my life. The laws build the kingdom, but a bad fruit will divide. A system of oppression when the laws are not defined. So I don't know it all, but still I'll decide what's right. Yeah. I'll decide what's right. Yeah. What's right? Hey. Yeah. I decide what's right. Yeah. Alright, thank you, everybody.
Okay, Jay-Hoon. Thank you. And pass the mic.
Jay-Hoon, how you? about your speech was about free speech, right?
Yeah.
And I'm coming from Berkeley, California, where Mario Savio stood on a police car and asked for free speech.
Okay.
And then even at UC Berkeley, there was a time when they wanted Eldridge Cleaver to teach a class, and they wouldn't let him do it, but the students did just like you did, and they rose up and protested Sproul because Ronald Reagan didn't want him to teach, and they continued to protest for free speech. And I guess my question is, the sister here made a very good point that back in the 60s, there was no media that you guys have, social media, and yet they were able to cause a revolution and change basically America through the 60s, through music and different things. Do you see your generation being able to use it in the Assange case as a way to engage people in free speech, and not his case, but multiple things, and use social media in a more responsible way to make a difference?
Jehu, your response?
So yeah, Hashim, I definitely feel because of social media and the way we're able to access information and spread information, share information digitally, with videos, I do think that we have a new opportunity to really revolutionize free speech to a completely different degree. So I would agree with your statement, sir.
Any other comments for Jehu or questions?
Just doing great work again. I'm loving some of these lines, I see inevitably that power creates ego.
Yes, sir.
And truer words ever been spoken, power corrupts.
Yeah.
Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. But I mean, you have a lot of just gems like that. It's always great work.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Yeah.
Let's give Jehu another hand. Thank you, Jehu.
Hello, everybody. This is Dick Price and Sharon Kyle from the LA Progressive, and we're honored to be here today with Jeffrey Sterling. Hello, Jeffrey. How you doing?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me.
So Jeffrey is a lawyer and former CIA employee who was convicted of violating the Espionage Act for revealing details about a covert operation to supply Iran with flawed nuclear warhead blueprints to journalist James Risen. In 2015, you were sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. But your battle against the government had begun more than 15 years earlier when you were still at the CIA. After you lodged a racial discrimination complaint, you were eventually fired by the agency, and then you filed 2 federal lawsuits against it, one for retaliation and discrimination, another for obstructing the publication of your autobiography. You also spoke as a whistleblower to Congress. That experience then left you almost homeless, it's reported, until you could return to your hometown near St. Louis and rebuild your life, meeting your wife and landing a good job, but only to be arrested and imprisoned years later. Is that pretty much accurate as far as it goes?
Yeah, that's the roller coaster that has been my life. Yes, I think you encapsulated quite well.
So the first question, I'll start and then Sharon can have one. What parallels can you draw between your treatment by the US government and its current treatment of Julian Assange?
I think it shows that the US government will go to any lengths to quiet dissent or to retaliate against those who have not shown the US government in a favorable light. The government does not like its dirty little secrets to be out there in the public, especially if the government hasn't leaked that information itself. So going after me was an act of retaliation. I had the nerve to stand up to the CIA, who told me as a case officer, trained case officer, that I was a security risk because I stood out as a big black guy speaking Farsi. I stood up against them. I sued them in court. I was ready to go, ready for the fight, and the court system deemed that me, a black man standing up for his civil rights, was a threat to national security. And I still have trouble wrapping my head around that concept. But that established, I think, the CIA mechanism, the government mechanism to go after me. That allowed them a free hand to persecute me and eventually unfairly and illegitimately prosecute me. I think they're doing the same thing with Assange. They're denying him any so-called rights that they may guarantee him. But he voiced issues that the US government would rather not be out in the public eye. So therefore, he has to be a target. He has to be quieted, and he also has to be made an example of. And I think that is exactly more of the motivation in my persecution. They had to make an example of someone who stands up to them. And I think that's exactly what they're doing with Assange.
Said. So I have to admit, and I would guess that this is true of you, that when Barack Obama was sworn in as President of the United States, it was a thrilling experience. How do you feel knowing that the Obama administration...
It was.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, I was absolutely thrilled. I honestly did not expect to see an African-American elected president of this country. I was absolutely thrilled. Me and my wife, Holly, actually had tears that night that he was declared the winner. Little did I know at that time that I had voted for the man who would eventually put me in prison for his witch hunt on whistleblowers, an unprecedented witch hunt on whistleblowers. He had them targeted from the beginning of his presidency till the end. And that sort of energy to quiet dissent, to go after whistleblowers has continued. Barack Obama set a horrible precedent for truth. Whistleblowers are all about truth. And I think it's just unfortunate. That's an aspect of his presidency that I think not many people know about. But I think it is actually an underpinning of his entire administration.
Next, we're going to bring up Karina.
An American attempt to assuage Assange. The Pelicans briefed me about this. They said, much like the sun, in the way it rises and sets, the freedom of voice is a gift, often taken for granted by those unaware of their own riches. Free to write any combination of words. I sit, I stare observantly at the clouds. I listen and tune into the earth's frequency, remaining hopeful, expecting, anticipating nothing, hopeful that my primary contract tied directly to source creator might result in some pattern of words on a page that could result in refuge. Language, I'm told, may do this through scripture. The truth results in expiation. Occupied nations, however, are not holy land. So while hopeful, I watch as the colors of the wind fade to gray. Excruciation, reflection, American tradition of parliamentary procurement masquerading paper bills as bills of rights granted only in illusory form, or so it seems. Extra, extra, read all about it. Man tells the truth, the penalty, death. As Atlas learned me, the truth is singular, and all else are mistruths. And the most beautiful thing is that our species is evolving to no longer allow ourselves be subject to criminal abuse. Light works in mysterious ways. Western rule and New World Order evolved too. From wagon wheels of grain to data packets of currency and drone shipments of lithium, level X security clearance. The earth itself and our humanity is an entity entirely separate of the intelligence agencies designed in cohesive systems which reach to invalidate truth, to perpetuate a narrow view of the world. It becomes quite easy to control a people when they fit into tiny boxes made of ticky-tacky. And Mr. Julian, I do not know you. I admit I have passively cared less when I've previously heard your name. And if by some chance you are hearing this right now, let me tell you, there is no government terroristic enough to strip you of your soul's freedom. True, true. So, in an American attempt to assuage Assange, let me be clear, the just and humane thing to do is to let this man live, not just out of an act of survival, freedom, in the name of liberation. And the next step must be to set him free, because you have firstly, certainly, pissed us off.
Good job, Karina.
Okay, what did we hear in Karina's piece? Thanks, Karina. So I'm going to ask you about the Ayn Rand reference, Atlas Shrugged, and how does that play in there, and what are you telling us?
Well, it's interesting to me because my reference is actually from Cloud Atlas, the movie, and that there are a few lines that come from that, as Atlas learned me instead of taught me. Truth is singular, all else are mistruths. That's a direct quote from that. True, true is another, and I will no longer allow myself be subject to criminal abuse. So all of those are from that. And I also liked the double meaning of Atlas, like you had mentioned, but this is why I love art, because the audience makes me seem more wise. No, I'm just kidding. But the audience has more wisdom than I can bring, honestly. So that would have been cool to play it off like I intended that, but no, I didn't.
Hi, Karina. Beautiful piece. I just really love the part where you were talking about how it was human evolution that we will no longer, accept injustice to ourselves, and I wanted to see if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's this evolution that has come to be of our freedom. It's like we believe we will one day be free, to then we are working to be free. And now I really believe it's radical, but we have to say, I am free. We are free. Because there's no more trying. Like, there's no more, we need to just declare that it is, so that it is. Because it is.
So your piece speaks of a lot of strength and hope. And as he was saying about it, you talk about our species is evolving, and we're going to demand freedom of speech. But I'm a kid of the 60s. I mean, I was in the street I was in Vietnam and then in the streets against Vietnam. And if I look at the arc of justice that's supposed to, or the arc of history that's supposed to bend toward justice, as I look around now, I have a hard time matching your faith that really we are evolving. I mean, New York Times today has a piece about, in the last administration, they actively considered sending 250,000 soldiers to the Mexican border to actually seal it off. I don't think we would have fathomed that in 1968. So I don't know, I admire your hopefulness, and I hope you really feel that.
Man, I'm a lawyer, and we do, I tell my students that there are 4 occupations in America whose bread and butter is word work, right? They live or die on the word work they do. That would be writers, poets, lawyers, and rappers. And I include spoken word among those with the art of discourse, the art of language, and you talk about language a lot in here. Language may do this. Truth results in expiation. I'm just loving the language throughout here. That intelligence and agency are in truth decentralized. And how long will you choose to insult our universal intelligence?
I really want to know. Do you think we're too stupid, too ashamed, or too distracted to know just how heinous your federal war crimes are, your acts of friendly fire? What's next?
Yes, I'm feeling all of that right there.
Oh, yeah. Your acts of friendly fire, supposed obligations to collateralizing autonomy, as if there ever could be an asset more valuable than the truth.
At this point, let me bring in something that our director wanted to make sure that we were able to connect, and this is a germane time to get at it, and that is the price that Gary Webb paid for, getting the truth out. When you talk about, for example, the cost in lives that can be that are part of the price we pay or can pay when the freedom of voice is trammeled. Gary Webb, let me put it this way. What happened to Gary Webb is what's happening to Julian Assange, in the sense that I think a lot of the reason the mainstream press is not more behind Julian Assange, even though a bad precedent in his case can throttle them all, can hurt them all. Why aren't they rising up in a chorus more in support of him? I think a lot of it comes down to professional jealousy. He broke more stories than many of his critics combined, and Gary Webb broke the story, I think, of the last century after Watergate. Cracked the complicity of the CIA and other government officials in jump-starting the crack plague in South Central LA through Freeway Ricky Ross. And when I first looked at that story, I just thought it was conspiracy theory stuff, because the oracles of the press, from the LA Times to the New York Times to the Washington Post, turned on Gary Webb like a pack of wolves in '96 when he released that story, Dark Alliance, in San Jose Mercury Press, online, and they were threatened by online stuff already. That was already biting into their market share, and here he comes, scooping the LA Times in their own backyard, and scooping all of these other newspapers on one of the stories of the century. And out of professional jealousy, they turned on him, and ultimately, the black cyberspace kept the story alive in '96. It pinged around until Maxine Waters was able to get Deutsch, the then sitting CIA director, to come out here to LA in Watts and confront 800 angry citizens saying, why did the CIA help jumpstart the crack plague that is now, consuming our communities? And Deutsch didn't have a good answer. He said, we're going to investigate it. A couple years later, they released quietly in the press that, our internal investigations revealed that there were 52 CIA operatives involved in the transfer of drugs from Colombia through Nicaragua to South Central LA. So it wasn't, just a woolly, wild-eyed, woolly conspiracy theory. There was fact behind it, and yet Gary Webb was dismissed by and on the grounds of professional jealousy, in the same way that Assange now, I think, is under some of that. Or else, why wouldn't the press be more active in trying to make sure that receiving and distributing the truth isn't criminalized? There are actual charges in his espionage indictments. That's the only charge. You distributed the truth. Truthful information.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, especially in context to what we were just discussing, and the fact that you just evoked Maxine Waters' name. It's like, thank you. To any and all self-proclaimed authority figures, wiretapped in to hear the black sheep sing, I shouldn't even have to tell you. Actually, we are indigo children, and we are aware.
Let's go to a video of Nick Skiles, chronicler of Gary Webb. Part of Gary Webb's story was that of suicide. Sometimes people think of acts of self-destruction, like perhaps Sandra Bland, as just isolated acts, but actually there can be social oppression in self-destruction. If Sandra Bland did take her own life, it was preceded by injustice. And in Gary Webb's case, His suicide was preceded by injustice, the injustice of being turned on by his own colleagues because he was reporting the truth, and scooping some of them in their professional jealousy reared its head and made them turn toward him with stony indifference, ultimately leading to his suicide. So there can be injustice and social oppression even in self-destruction.
Welcome, Nick.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you briefly tell us what it was that Gary Webb uncovered, and correspondingly what he didn't uncover and state in Dark Alliance? And do you see any connections or similarities between the kind of censorship Webb faced to what is happening to Julian Assange now?
Sure. Gary Webb was an investigative reporter with the San Jose Mercury News, and his series, Dark Alliance in 1996, was the first time that a major newspaper published an expose online. And the expose was about the connection between the crack epidemic and the CIA's 1980s war in Nicaragua against the Sandinista government. He uncovered that Freeway Ricky Ross, who was a legendary drug dealer in Los Angeles, who the LA Times had called the kingpin of crack cocaine, had actually been supplied by Nicaraguans that were working with the CIA and had apparently been protected by them. And this was an explosive series, in part because of the African American community reading it online and demanding answers. And so it led to a congressional investigation. But by the time that happened, the major newspapers reacted to Gary Webb's reporting by dismissing his claims. And in part, what they did was focus on claims that he didn't make, which is a process that's very familiar to people that have seen how the government and the media often deal with whistleblowers. And so in this case, what the mainstream media focused on was the allegation not included in Webb's reporting that the CIA had invented crack cocaine, that the CIA had somehow deliberately spread crack cocaine throughout inner cities in America. Now, it's important to understand that this was something that many African American people had been aware of in terms of some sort of lack of accountability by the government as to what was happening in the inner cities in the 1980s. There was a huge explosion of violence. And basically, the crack cocaine epidemic decimated an entire generation of people in the inner cities, and it was extremely painful. Also, there were a lot of questions that weren't being answered, such as how exactly do these drugs end up here? And the connection between the drug sales in the inner cities and the supply side of the question in Latin America, Colombia, Central America had never really been completely solved. Webb actually did make a major advancement in answering that question by revealing the extent to which the CIA turned a blind eye to the activity of people it was working with in the so-called fight against communism in the 1980s. And that is that after Webb's series came out, after the mainstream media operating basically with anonymous sources in the government, including the CIA, trying to discredit him, the CIA then turned around because of the political pressure, thanks to the African American community by and large, released a report admitting that for 10 years, actually more like 15 years, the agency had a formal agreement, a legal agreement with the Justice Department stating that it would not report drug dealing activities and other crimes by people it was working with. And this was a much broader scandal than Gary Webb had reported.
How do you see this relating to the ongoing prosecution of Julian Assange?
Well, the Julian Assange case is like an epic example of the failure of the media to do its job. And so I think that he basically was the first major whistleblower in the contemporary era of new journalism, so to speak, of new forms of technology aided by the internet, enabling whistleblowers to actually circumvent the media's control over what Americans see and hear, and not just Americans, but across the world. And so with WikiLeaks, this was the first time that you had a major, national security story coming out from a source that wasn't an elite player on the media landscape. And so Julian Assange was the first example. Ed Snowden, Chelsea Manning, other whistleblowers came later of people that felt it was their duty to try to get information out to the public that they were being denied and that was being covered up by the government. And they knew that if they simply handed this to the elite media, that it would not actually get reported. That, as I explore in Spook, there are many examples of the New York Times, Washington Post in particular, these two papers sitting on stories of national significance, whether it has to do with illegal surveillance, whether it has to do with elite espionage, that affects the constitutional rights of both Americans and people around the world, and human rights in general. They sit on these stories for political reasons. And so Assange was somebody that just tried to circumvent this, and he paid the price because ultimately the media enabled a campaign of controversialization, of discrediting, foisted by the US government, particularly by the national security apparatus, to try to focus on Assange himself rather than the material that he was providing, and to try to make him the story. And this is exactly what most people think of when they think of Julian Assange. He's a controversial character. He's possibly a rapist. He's somebody that looks haggard and bizarre in pictures that you see on the internet. Now, this is all straight out of the CIA playbook of how to try to discredit a whistleblower.
We're actually at our final artist. Again, I want to remind us, I'm not knocking entertainers, but today we are presenting artists who are committed to helping us think critically, examining issues, and using their art for activism. So with that, I'd like to bring up Chris as our final artist, and excited to see what he did for us today.
All right, how y'all doing? This is Chris CR, live from Los Angeles. All right, yeah. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. All right, of course. Man, of course they want to extradite, extrafy, exemplify, expedite the end of time. Welcome to America, center of the Western world, where there's no such thing as a truth or lie. Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to scrutinize, cause it's all swept under the rug, real snug, real nice. The real thugs wear cufflinks, not gloves, and we'll probably never see a jail selling their lives. There's no such things as checks and balances, just cashing checks and checking balances. Y'all done took democracy and flipped it on its head, giving yourselves a raise while we're trillions in debt. And millions are left in the winter cold, behind on rent, mortgage payments, student loans, and wondering, what are we doing wrong? We went left expecting a helping hand from an artillery man. Humanitarian acts from a helmet head hell-bent on military expansion. Yeah, Julian is a true threat to the Julius Caesars. The problem is they don't get a true leader doesn't even need to be there for the followers to carry on procedures. No longer will they conquer and divide at their leisure. You got some explaining to do, heinous acts to speak for. Thank God for the whistleblowers, freedom bringers. Yeah, let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Free Julian Assange, free Snowden, and free Daniel Hale. Long live Gary Webb. Thank you.
That was a great final piece to tie it all together. Thank you, Chris. All right, final comments from the group. Hold on.
Really like it, but I think, she talked about whistleblowers, right? And I guess, because Jody was talking about, you mentioned Gary Webb at the end, and I know Gary Webb, like many other people, not just, let's say, investigative reporters, but from the Black Panther Party to Malcolm X to Yuri Cucciano, so many people have been demonized by people in order to be able to do things to them. One of the first things you do is somebody you demonize them, then you're able to do what you want, and society lets it go. But do you feel, as me and many would feel, that a whistleblower is one of the most important parts of a healthy civilization and democracy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I feel like whistleblowers, they are the great equalizer right now. We're entering a interesting period in history where we have to decide as a people, are we going to allow a free press to disintegrate, or are we going to hold our leaders accountable for what they do with the tax money that we so willingly give them? So whistleblowers are, they're so crucial to the history, or to the future history of free press and whether or not we're going to have it. So yeah, whistleblowers are, the almighty power.
Yeah, I really like the connection you made between the military and warfare and Assange, because that's really the nub of the complaints against Julian Assange, as he revealed crimes our soldiers were committing in our name. And that's part of the reason that the government has come down so hard on them. And it's also partly why the media has been laying into Julian Assange, because they're tied into the military-industrial complex as well in many cases.
Well, not all media, corporate media. I just want to make that distinction. It's really about corporate media and empire. And I think that that's why we don't get the kind of coverage for Julian Assange that we need.
Yeah, I think that's the one consistent thread of the U.S. is, they're gonna rule with a steel fist, whether it's in America at our own protests for George Floyd, or if it's a protest across seas in Central and South America. They're gonna, they're gonna rule with the steel fist, and there's no compassion from these government agencies, and it's upon us to call for that compassion, to call for a change, and to call for the truth. So thank you.
Yeah, I really like the way you wrap this up with some of these powerful lyrics. You took democracy, flipped it on its head. At the end of the day, that's what this is really about, democracy, right? What democracy is about is making power accountable to those affected by its exercise. That's the heart of democracy. And we can't make power accountable to those affected by its exercise without there being truth, right? Without information, without, some kind of check. As you say, there are no checks and balances, just cashing checks and checking balances, right? Right? So there isn't that. The fourth estate is not there to play its watchdog role, which that it's essential to democracy itself. It's the only way democracy works, right? Is with information of the kind that Julian Assange exposed.
Yeah, exactly. If the government isn't going to check itself, then who's going to do it? And if it's not, they're trying to take away the last possible line of defense, which has always been free press and the journalists. Protect the journalists and protect the whistleblowers.
Yeah, so this has been fabulous. I'm going to give the last word on this to the person who made a lot of this possible, brought together all of these terrific artists who were all-stars, every one, to a man and woman. Thank you so much, Layla.
Well, thank you, Jody. And I do want to say thank you to all of you that worked to put this together. And just to bring it full circle, as artists, you are the press. You have a responsibility, you have a voice, and we count on you to do the reporting. So once this is complete, since we are in the age of social media, I'm counting on all of you to post and to get this word out, as I will do, so that we can continue the work and bring this full circle and see the results of artists in action doing the work together. So thank you guys all for putting this together and having and including us. Thank you, Jody.
Yes. I wanna run for all the things that I've said. Nowhere to run and no turning back now. Don't speak like
lock your doors and be discreet. Some people keep their eyes closed, terrified of what they see. Others keep their eyes open, I swear that they still be sleep. Paralyzed in the noise and paranoid in the streets. They can and will hurt you for everything that you know. And if you share it with the world, why would they even trust you for? You reading this, now it means that I'm long gone in Sudan, mauled off for even Hong Kong. They quiet down the words on the internet page. That same shit can happen from singing the wrong song. Information, a pandemic, living a calm storm. I'm telling the right story, they dropping the wrong bomb. I'm on a run for all the things that I've said.